Mr. Crawfish says, "Don't plant corn. Me not like corn."
YouTube, what's going on? It's another day out here on the field, man. Back from vacation. We had a week at the Florida Keys down in Marathon. If you haven't seen that video, check that out, part 1 and 2. Part 3, it involves eating an iguana, so check it out. But right now I'm in the crawfish field. Vacation's over, man, and I'm gonna tell you what, vacation's great, but I am glad to be back to work. I'm telling you what, man, it feels weird not being out in these fields. I was eager to get back. Got a lot going on. Believe it or not, we're preparing for harvest, among other things. I got fields of collard greens I got to get planted. Got to get the fields ready for all that. Rice is growing. Everything's doing good. But this behind me, this is the crawfish field. If you remember, this field was all covered with water. And my crawfish bonanza extravaganza, or whatever it's called, extravaganza bonanza, and South Kakalaki crawfishing part 1. If you've seen that, you know this field looked very different. Right now we got cracked earth. We slowly drew the water down. All this cracked earth right here is gonna look like, all that. And all that is a mixture of Sesbania, volunteer rice from last year, barnyard grass, various types of sedges. On the other side of the field over there, there's tons of beak sedge over there. We've got lots of wild plants. See right here, this has just recently been dried out, so it ain't had time, but there's little tiny sprouts all over that mud right there. And right here, if you see, we've got a bunch of water lotus, which I'm not crazy about. I wish we didn't have that water lotus. Another thing you don't want is, you see that tall stuff right here? Those are pockets of cattail that just popped up this year. They were not even in this field last year when we planted the rice in here, and they just popped up. And those things have rhizomes. Rhizomes are like big fat roots that run all underneath the ground. And not only that, they produce those big fluffy seed, the big seed head that's got the fluffy stuff in it, and they go all over the place. And I'm not crazy about that stuff, so we're gonna have to keep an eye on that. I made the mistake of pulling a board just to kind of get a head start on this, and boy, that was a big mistake. I literally had like two inches to play with. The water was starting to recede in the impoundment, and I wanted to go ahead and get a little jump on things, so I pulled a board, and we lost about maybe 4 inches of water, and I only had about 2 inches to play with. So I ended up having to drag the boat around a lot, or ended up having to throw on some hip boots because my Crocs kept getting sucked off of my feet. I had to put on some old hot hip boots and walk around out here and collect the traps. So no fun, and lesson learned. I will not do that again. I will get all my traps before I pull any boards from now on. I believe that plant right there is called duck potato. It's kind of weird out here because I'm walking around and I got cracked earth right here, and then you got a little flat place right here. If you don't watch where you're going to end up in some pretty sticky mud. This mud is really sticky. This is perfect stuff for growing rice. Look at here. Old rice seeds, the old hulls on the ground. There's some volunteer rice in here, man. Check that out. That's a rice sprout right there. That's a rice sprout. That's a rice sprout there. That's pretty strong genetics, man. If that seed lived through the winter, that's a strong seed. Thinking about seeking out some of these plants that sprout up and seeing if I can get them to produce a head before it gets too cold. Y'all hold on, I'll be right back in just a minute. I got to figure out my route across this mud or I'm going to lose my Crocs. Oh, and by the way, one more weed that I didn't mention. A very important one, smartweed. There's lots of smartweed on some of these high spots out here, man. I'll show y'all some in a minute. It tends to like to grow in its own little hill, like a little high spot here and there. It just does its own thing. It doesn't really get with the other weeds for some reason. Look at this. Look at this. All that right there is Sesbania. Sesbania with seed-bearing stuff like barnyard grass and sedges and who knows what, volunteer rice all in here. So let me tell you what's going to happen. You got all these seed-bearing plants, rice mixed in with it. What's going to happen is all this stuff's going to grow up. It's going to go to seed. Sesbania is going to be, 8 feet high. And the ducks are going to pile in this impoundment. And they're going to feed on the periphery of this island of Sesbania. And they're going to hide in it, get nice, fat, and happy. Safe from the hawks, safe from the owls at night when they're roosting, and they can eat all they want and stay in that Sesbania worry-free. Now, let me show you something real quick. That is smartweed right there. There's a good patch of it right here. See, some of it's even got little, what do you call that, florets or whatever, little flowers on them. See there? It'll be full of white, little tiny white flowers. It bears a black seed. And man, I'm telling you what, if you've ever eaten a lot of ducks that's been gorging themselves on that smartweed, it's all the way down this edge. For some reason, smartweed likes its own like little environment. It'll grow in thick clusters wherever it grows, but beyond that, it ain't out here. I mean, you got one or two, but that's it. Look at there. That's a crawfish tunnel. Right there, crawfish tunnel. He's got it plugged up with mud. That means that one made it. Cover it back up, hide it from view. Seeing a lot of crawfish skeletons out here. Look at that. And you're gonna see that, man. When you got a couple million crawfish out here, you're gonna see the crawfish. You know what I'm saying? You're gonna see dead ones. I mean, the coons are gonna get some of them. You see where the coon pulled the mud off, the little mud dauber off the top of it. They put a little mud on top like that. Gonna make that little chimney. And the coon pulls it off. That rascal tries to dig down in there and get the crawfish out. But I'm seeing a lot of tunnels. You know, you're gonna have some mortality. Here's one that made it. Make sure I'm looking out for cottonmouths. There's one that made it. There's a crawfish tunnel. So that's good. There's several right in this area right in here. Stinking old raccoons. I bet you one thing, them hammers won't be thinking about a crawfish if I get old Bo and Luke after them. They'll have their mind on trying to survive and stay alive. I'm ready for coon season to get back. Man, I didn't tell y'all. I don't think I told y'all, man. My dogs, I turn them loose in a piece of woods that, you know, I run them during every couple weeks. I take them out, let them stretch their legs during the summer. And, man, I turn them loose in a piece of woods that ain't got no gators. Like, it ain't got no gators. There's this one little place where there's a big, like a 4-foot culvert. And they dug out, you know how they dig out to build the road from both sides? They dig out around the culvert and it's kind of a deep spot. My dogs come back about 3 weeks ago with bite marks on them. I said, what? And what in the world is going on here? I got them back to the truck, didn't even realize they had been bit. Bo had a perfect row of 4 puncture marks right across, diagonally across his nose and one under his jaw. So that tells me the gator grabbed him. He went down to the water to smell. The coon led them there. And when they got there, the gator was sitting there waiting. And they were running the coon. They were barking. And the gator bit Bo like this. Bo got loose. Evidently, I don't know if Luke maybe jumped in to fight or whatever. And then Luke got a big gash across his belly. He got about a 2-inch gash right there. It was just a little skin wound, you know. It was just a tear across his skin right there. I sprayed some purple stuff. I cleaned it out real good and sprayed some purple stuff on it. It healed up good on its own. Bo healed up good on his own, but my Lord, I'm glad my dogs didn't get ate by a gator. And I never suspected that. I put them in a piece of woods that I would not have thought there'd have been any gators in. Well, I'll tell you what, man. That would have been a sad loss. I'd have been real sad about that. I trained them dogs from puppies. But anyway, I don't like gators. They the little gators come out here, and when we're trying to crawfish and all, they'll come out here and tip over our traps all out in the middle out there. We had a problem all year. We'd have multiple traps tipped over all along the edge of this levee right here. They'd be flipped over nose down, or you know, the top would be down in the water, and I mean, they're just tearing them up. There's a tree I'm not fond of. That's a Chinese tallow. If you see one, cut it down. If it's small enough, pull it up by the roots. They're an invasive species. Chinese tallow. Right here. Here's volunteer rice. Heads are starting to tip over. That means the seeds are starting to fill in. We got one head here that's pollinating. It's pollinating. These are filling up. But right over here, you see all that right there? See all that yellow? That's rice. That's volunteer rice. There's a whole bunch of it growing right along there. We got volunteer rice growing all over there. The Sesbania right in front of it, rice right behind it. And man, I'm telling you what, the ducks are gonna pile in that. You see there? There's some volunteer rice right there. See the head right there? Head's starting to fill in, starting to tip over. Hey, there's a pile of traps we got to gather up. I got piles of traps every so far all the way around the impoundment. We got to ride around with a trailer and gather them up. Man, but one thing I want to tell you all about this impoundment. This is a very common problem that I see with duck impoundments, is that planting corn is a crapshoot. I mean, it is you're taking a real chance. And what I mean by saying that is that the duck impoundments are usually created in a clay type soil. They're created in this soil because they hold water. That's why they put them where they put them, because it's heavy clay soil. You don't want a dike made out of sand. You want a dike made out of a heavy clay soil, a clay loam, something like that, sandy clay loam. And this soil right here, that black organic matter on top is about maybe 5-6 inches deep, and below that is a hard pan of what I call blue clay. It's that gray clay, and buddy, let me tell you something right now. You put a tablespoon of water on that and come back next week, it'll be right there. And growing corn, they tried to grow corn out here. The corn crop did not do well at all. And as a matter of fact, what they ended up with is that. The corn did very poorly. The weeds came in. The soil was too wet to get out there and spray and do all that stuff. So the weeds just had their way. Well, what they found out was, hey, these weeds produce a lot of seed and a lot of cover because they get tall, and the ducks really like them. So then we did that year before last year. We planted rice. We did the rice and crawfish. And this year they said, you know what? We liked all those wild plants, and we're going to have some volunteer rice coming up too. Just let it go. Let nature do its thing. Let the rice come up amongst all the wild seed, and let's see what happens. They said, you know, we think the ducks are going to respond favorably to it. Now, if we could just get a decent migration, we'll be on point. Corn just doesn't do very well. I know people that plant corn and they do okay, but then there's other fields that they plant and just awful. Awful. I went to a duck club one time, and their corn, they had paying members and everything, and their corn looked absolutely pitiful, and they were asking me, what do we need to do? I said, well, I can tell you the first thing you need to do, stop planting corn. Second thing you need to do, plant rice. They had center pivot irrigation there. It was too dry. They were afraid to water it because it was too dry. Then they went, and the corn was stunted. It was real short. Some of it was tasseling out, and it was only 3 foot tall. It was looking terrible. So then they said, well, you know what? We'll till it all up. We'll replant. We still got time. We'll plant it. We'll turn on the center pivot irrigation. We'll go ahead and water it because this year is looking like it's going to be a dry year. Well, when they did that, the very next week, nature flipped the script on them. It started pouring rain. They got a whole bunch of rain. They had already watered it. Once it got up so high, they started watering it. They had already watered it. And so the ground was moist. That rain came and it just sat there. And it just messed the corn crop up, man. If I had a duck impoundment, I would not plant corn. I would do moist soil and rice. I'd rotate rice and moist soil, but it would be a combination of rice and moist soil. And, you know, maybe some Jap millet. You know, Jap millet can handle getting its feet wet once it gets up. But I would not plant corn because you are rolling a set of fixed dice. Them dice are fixed, buddy. You plant that corn if you want to. You're going to waste a bunch of money. I know somebody that spent $35,000, around $35,000-ish to plant corn on their impoundments. And the rain came and just wore it out, man. So I strongly advise people not to plant corn on duck impoundments. People do it. Ducks love it. They do. They love corn, man. They can plant it and ducks will come if they get a good year. But there's a lot of people I talk to, they get 2 out of 5 years is a good year. That's not good odds to me. So take it for what it's worth. Rice, moist soil management, Japanese millet. If there's something else out there you can plant, have at it. But make sure it can get its feet wet. Stay away from corn. Golly, boy. That's a monster right there. This impoundment also has a ton of lamb's quarters. One thing about this stuff, man, this stuff smells exactly like fresh basil. I'm pretty sure man, that smells good. This stuff produces a lot of black seeds. I noticed that. This stuff grows really thick. It'll start growing out yonder. And it produces a lot of black seeds. That is a wild Caesar mushroom. It's got that little cup at the bottom. Little white cup right here. That's how I know how to identify it. Very tasty little mushroom. It's got the little ring up in here. Little white cup at the bottom. Delicious little mushroom. If you find a bunch of them growing, I've eaten them before. Remember, if you ever go pick a mushroom, if you ain't 100% sure what it is, do not eat it.